Another question I talk to companies about all the time is this is all so overwhelming. Cybersecurity, SOC 2, risk. Oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start. Where should I start? I tell people it's like a big ball of twine and there's these little strings sticking out everywhere and I don't even know which one to pull. Like, I'm afraid, which one do I pull? It's a great question, right? Where do you start? Because you can't eat the elephant all at one time, right? You can't boil the ocean. You do it one pot at a time or one bite at a time. And so it's very important that you break it apart and break it down. Take small steps. Companies that try to take on too much too quickly, they get bogged down and they make no traction. I see it all the time. And then they finally raise the little ponchos flag. If anybody remembers ponchos back in the day, help, I don't know how to do this. We've spun for 6 months. We've spun for 3 years. We don't know how to do this. So you don't want to take on the whole thing. It's too overwhelming. I had a conversation with a client a couple of months ago, late last year, and they made the comment, oh yeah, okay, we're going to get this done and we're going to align to NIST CSF framework. I'm like, over the holidays. Yep, I'll have it done by January. Don't really think so. You can look at the controls, you can look at the framework, but are you going to have all this stuff remediated? Or are you going to have it all in place? You're going to have a plan? Not so much. So lofty goals, great. And you should have lofty goals to move through the stuff, to keep pushing you through and motivating you to get to an end. But really dial it back in one step at a time and break it apart and just make traction, put stakes in the ground, make milestones, get the wins under your belt and just keep going. That's the name of the game, because I tell companies this all the time. You are never done with this stuff. Sorry, never, never, never done. You don't get to done. It's just like the list in our houses, right? We think, oh, look, I crossed off 3 things. Yay. What? There's 30 things that replace those 3 things. We never get to done in our personal lives, right? We just keep going. It's the same thing with compliance, cybersecurity, risk, all this stuff. You never get done. You just keep going. It's all about milestones and consistent traction and realistic goals. And then the motivation just keep pushing through. And that's really the name of the game for success here. And so here's a few places to start, just tactically. Here's some places to start. So risk assessment. I know it sounds like a textbooky exercise, but the intent of a risk assessment is to identify risk. And it's to quantify how the risks that you've identified, to rank and score them so that you can sort your list to the top 5, top 10, top whatever you want to deal with, and start working the list top down. So risk assessment is a great technique that you can do with good old Excel. It doesn't require you to go buy any tool. And so it's easy for any company, not easy, but any company could do it, right? What are your risks? How do you score them? And then what controls do you have in place that would help to mitigate those risks? And which are the ones that need your attention? Prioritize that remediation. Start doing it. Simple, right? Like that's it at its core. So any company can do that. And most all the frameworks require a risk assessment. I wonder why that is. Because it is a great place to start. It is the right place to start. Because no company has unlimited time and resources. Nobody. And so a risk assessment will make sure that you focus the limited time and the limited resources where they need to be focused and not somewhere else on, the latest, oh, I read this article, we need to do this. Oh, I read this article, we need to do this. If you got time and money for that, great, do them all. But most companies don't. Most companies don't have that kind of time and money. So a risk assessment helps keeps you very focused. You read a new article, it identifies a risk that you didn't see before. Put it on your risk assessment, evaluate it. Where does it fall? You're very methodical about how you do this. Last year, it was very interesting. A kind of a new risk for most companies was employees having 2 jobs. It was funny. It wasn't funny. It's terrible. But I talked to several companies that they had to fire people because they found out, because everybody was remote, they found out they were working a whole second job, not like moonlighting. I mean, a whole second job with vacation time and benefits. I don't even know how they keep all that straight, to be quite honest. But it's unethical behavior, right? But who would have thought that? Like, that wouldn't have been on anybody's risk assessment. But there's several companies I've helped this year with risk assessment, like, if I'm on there. And think about that, because unfortunately it happened. And so then what is your controls in place that you're going to use to help mitigate that? It's a remote world. That's not likely to change. We don't need to change it. It's working well in most companies and most industries. But that's a new risk that needs to be looked at, and how you're going to deal with that as a company, and what controls you might have in place or need to put into place to stop that, or at least highlight that might be happening. And so that's where risk assessment is such a powerful mechanism, not difficult if you don't overcomplicate it, if you just keep it simple, but it can really help to drive your efforts and really help to provide a huge lift of security in your organization. Pen test, Volscan. So penetration testing at its very highest, simplest level is your bubble of your company. Where can it be penetrated from the outside in? Or where can it be compromised? That's a great thing. You hire companies. There's some AI-based tools in the world that will do that. It's a great place to start. It's a really good thing to know that I think I'm secure, but am I secure? Can you get in? I don't know, pay for a pen test. It's a great place to start. Then once you get your pen test results, that will help you to identify risk, same like with the risk assessment. Put those risks on your risk assessment, do a little quick analysis on them, and decide which ones you need to remediate first and work your list. It's great. It's a great place to start. Volscan is the same thing. Earlier I talked about vulnerabilities and how important those are. Leaving my front door unlocked doesn't mean somebody's going to come in and rob me, but it's a vulnerability that can be exploited. Do you know if you have vulnerabilities in your organization? Volscans are a great way to do that, to identify those vulnerabilities and then put them on your risk template, or however you're tracking that, prioritize them, rank them, and remediate them. Done. So a pen test will help you remediate that risk. A Volscan will help you remediate that risk. It's not, and both of those, just like a risk assessment, are going to help you with any framework or any compliance. So they're going to push you forward. They're not going to push you backward. They're great mechanisms to do if you don't already do them. But I work with a lot of companies who do their Volscans and they do their pen test, but they get the report and then they just kind of haphazard look at it. I'm like, oh, you almost got there. And so I work with companies all the time. You got to take all the results of those mechanisms, that risk identification mechanism. You got to prioritize it. You got to rank it. You got to risk score it, whatever your process is. And then you've got to make sure you remediate it. You don't have to remediate it today. It can be a medium risk or medium high risk that you maybe remediate within 3 months. But how are you going to make sure you don't forget about it? How are you going to make sure it's there? Are you going to log a ticket? Are you going to track it in a spreadsheet? Like, how are you going to do this? And so it's deciding what that process is so that those things don't get dropped. And then you don't do these things one time and you're done. Volscans, a lot of companies do those quarterly. Pen test, very standard. They do it annually. So you're going through the exercise again, And so, but those are great mechanisms for companies who've done nothing with cybersecurity. A gap assessment against a framework would be my last big suggestion, is a great starting point. Like, for example, SOC 2. You can have a SOC 2 readiness or a gap assessment. I do this with companies that they're not really overly urgently motivated to get the SOC 2 report, which is interesting to me, but they're leveraging SOC 2 as a framework to see where they have holes. So I admired them. I've actually worked with several companies this past year. They will eventually get their SOC 2, but it's like, we'll get to that. Mostly what we want to know is, let's look at the SOC 2 framework. Have you help us evaluate where we are in our control environment compared to that? Where are our holes? And then let us go work and remediate those. SOC 2 It's a great framework because it has a very specific kind of cybersecurity and technical control focus, but it's not like far reaching. It's deep in certain areas, but it's not like everything. So for companies who are doing this stuff kind of for the first time, it really is a very good place to start and attainable. You can also do something like ISO 27001. It's going to be more far reaching across your organization, but it's going to be a little bit less depth in how you do it and some more latitude. They're just different framework mechanisms. NIST CSF is going to be, oh my gosh, it is not a first time framework for any company that's trying to do this for the first time, but it's out there. And I will have conversations with companies where they're like, oh, NIST CSF, I can do that, right? And I'm like, good luck with that. You have nothing. You have no control. Zero. Let's not go for that yet. Let's dial that back. But a gap assessment against a framework is a great place to start because that's already structured. That's already there. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. That will cover your cybersecurity. That will help you sleep at night. Just knowing where you are compared to a framework, whichever one you choose to go with and work with. And a lot of companies do multiple frameworks, and then you've got to make sure your crosswalk of the frameworks are, done, and align your controls to that. But that's a great place for companies to start.